Ritual, Healing, Power, and Community. Part 5. Power and Corruption. In my own village, I have seen medicine men speak things into disappearance or drastic transformation. I was still a little boy when I first saw it from my grandfather. It was one hot and sunny afternoon. We were both sitting under the only shade tree in the front yard of the compound. Grandfather was carving a hoe. A vulture that was sitting in the tree crapped on him. The bird's guano fell on grandfather's bald head and splattered all over it, including his face. He spoke a funny vocalic language while trying to clean up the mess with his hand. The bird came crashing down and fell a few feet from us dead. I leapt up to grab it. At the time, I did not know that we didn't eat buzzards. The bird was like ash. When I touched it, it disintegrated into some kind of porous substance. It felt as if there had never been a bird in that tree. This power was bestowed upon my grandfather and others like him as part of their status as elders and healers, verified by their outstanding nature, their track record. Seeing this power, my young ego felt that if I were to possess such a skill, I would almost worship it. But such power is not for worshiping. It is for reaffirming one's linkage with the divine. Industrial cultures are like a nursery of youthful exuberance too eager for immediacy of power. Consequently, powers are being acquired too fast, and as a result, those kinds of powers make victims of those who use them. The buzzard was killed because it did not honor the old. There is a point in indigenous life when the respect owed to a person does not just come from other people, but from the natural world as well. Grandfather's status as an elder meant that he could order respect. He was in alignment with his title, which, as it was fouled, restored itself as the bird died. In addition, unlike children, who would take a buzzard shitting on them as a blessing or as a joke, an elder cannot because he has traveled the road that a child is yet to embark on. In the village, there is a strong censorship about the use of power because we know the dark side of a power that is acquired too soon. The gatekeeper, whom I mentioned earlier and who destroyed himself, got his power too soon. As a 2-week-old infant, he disappeared from the cradle while at the farm. People thought he had been eaten by a wild animal. They performed his funeral, but then the diviner said he was not dead. So they undid his funeral and waited. 6 years later, a child appeared at dusk accompanied by 2-headed serpents, some wild goats with human heads, and a variety of unrecognizable animal-looking entities. He said he belonged to a local family and that these followers were his friends. People vacated the family house in sheer panic. He sent his companions back to the mountain and settled in. People eventually came back to the house. From then on, he began performing miracles just for the fun of it. Anything he saw and wanted, he duplicated it or removed it from the hands of its owner. I remember going into a local bar with him. He had money for 1 beer, so we spent it on a bottle of beer. I drank about 6 bottles worth of that single beer. Each time the bottle was about to be empty, he would say a strange word, and it would become full again. In the meantime, bottles of beer were disappearing in the refrigerator. This is what led to his disempowerment. Traditionally, one determines the accumulation of power that one needs. As one grows older in the village and demonstrates a character that matches one's age, more powers become available. Of course, there are moments when information is given to someone by error. The immediate consequence of such error is that the person gets crushed by it. There was a guy who skipped initiation and who had promised someone in the National Archive office that he would record what happened in the secret room of the elder's initiation. He recorded the initiation, at least part of it. What he heard destroyed him. He lost his mind, and a few days later was found hanging from a tree dead. His crime was that he heard what he was not supposed to hear, and it stirred in him something that he could not contain. What powers you possess put you at risk of becoming a victim of them. In the traditional concept, using the sacred for show will result in one being crushed by the sacred. The opposite side of the sacred is found in Western technology. One cannot live in harmony with technology. One serves it and is fed with the hollow hopes of being fulfilled by it someday. Christianity invented or blessed the invention of the technological machine. The bulk of people in the third world today have experienced Christianity, not as separate from technology, but almost as a part of it. Throngs of people went to school to learn to be modern, that is, to be Christian. Many ended up serving the administrative machinery of Christianity, hoping for a taste of greater modernism. It was a team of Christians who came into my village over 12 years ago to ask those who went to church on Sunday to grow cotton so that they could buy it from them. The naive villagers saw in it an immense opportunity to become modern, that is, to acquire bicycles, shortwave radios, and clothes. What they did not see was that these white Christians had their own separate agenda. Because they were in control, they laid out what they wanted the villagers to do. It included using fertilizer and pesticides that were banned in France. No one had the money, but everyone bought on credit. They were barely able to pay their debts out of their sales. With bitterness, the villagers returned to their traditional farming, but the land was angry. Tortured by foreign chemicals, it went into a coma. Technology was sent into Africa as an instrument of terror. Colonization could not have happened without it followed by much destruction. I do not know why it feels to me that the Christianization of the third world is fueled by guilt, but somehow the often violent zeal with which indigenous people were pulled away from their traditions, the lingering fear of sinning, going to hell, failing to pay dues, were all projections of a filthy shadow. The colonizers called this a pacification mission. Then they came in to console those terrified by technology and converted them to Catholicism. My experience with Christianity in Africa is that its power does not come from Christ, but from technology and its corporate profile. Missionaries built churches, schools, and industries and stirred a vibration, created a disharmony that displaced the indigenous person. Christianity is a technological machine that ravaged and continues to ravage the indigenous world in Africa. The church is unfortunately a part of it. It is the place where people are psychologically processed, even corporate people. And so I repeat, what powers you possess put you at risk of becoming a victim of them. As part of the initiation rite, traditional people instill a secret homing device that prevents or guards against revealing or betraying sacred knowledge. A person becomes incapacitated each time he feels drawn by his ego towards sensationalism and repeating secret information about the sacred. For example, an initiate cannot say or do something that would produce a miraculous effect in front of people who have not participated in the kind of initiation that introduces people to these magical phenomena. So any person that feels the need to show power and does so is showing the end of his power at the same time. There are powers that, like a fish out of water, cannot function in the open air. In the village, the newly initiated person carries in himself something to prevent even inadvertent disclosure of sacred knowledge. This is what I call a homing device. It makes you feel like you're choking if you try to speak of this knowledge. And if you try to speak, it activates a certain suspension system within you, causing you to choke. It is like an electric fence that restricts the space within which a domestic animal can roam. A true African tribesperson cannot do whatever he or she wants abroad because distance does not hide him or her from the ancestors or elders. If I should make the error of disclosing something I shouldn't, the first time I return home and sit in front of an elder, he is going to begin by pointing to what I did, what I should not have done, and he will explain to me the damage that it does to me. The reason I am able to do it anyway is because what is within me has two functions. One is the function of a recorder that registers what wrongs I do, so they might be righted at a cleansing ceremony. The other is prevention from making terminal errors. This one I haven't known because, and thank God, so far I have not done anything to provoke it. What is the value and the wisdom of having this protection device? It is a way to keep real power alive in the individual and in the community. Remember, the value of a ritual community is that it creates power that protects and helps all within the community. My grandmother died in 1981. She was an extraordinary medicine woman, very secretive. If she were alive, she would kill me for telling my readers what she knew and did. When I see her, for instance, take on the body of a dog because she's too old to walk to the farm, I imagine that in modern cultures, this could be a great substitute for traveling by car and thus help eliminate pollution. I am not saying that everyone should turn into a dog to save the ozone layer. The dogs themselves might go on strike. But what I am suggesting is that there are powers available in which alignment between us and Mother Nature can produce wonder without messy side effects. Lycanthropy, transmogrification, the ability to take on an animal body, is not a science of externalization. It does not display or show off. My grandmother, as a dog, does not go around showing how effective she is, nor does she give any profane person the remotest opportunity to witness her transformation. The eyes of the profane have lethal effect on the transformation process. Among the mossy, the daggerer and the dogon, taking the shape of an animal has several interesting purposes. One is healing. There is a medicine woman in a village close to mine who specializes in healing by transforming the person into the kind of animal in whose body the specific illness cannot survive. How she does it is her secret. That she does it is not illusion to anybody who sees it. In fact, no one is allowed to see it while it is happening. Everyone can see it after it occurs. Usually the transformed person goes, at first, into a fit of rage and panic. A pig might squeal incessantly until the human consciousness in the pig surrenders to the fact that what he is trying to say cannot be heard as words by humans. This is when the healing begins. Dogon and mossy people transform themselves into animals for hunting purposes. Real animals can tell who is an animal and who is masquerading as one. But in a split second when they are trying to figure this out, the hunter can shoot them. From this, I draw that Western technology is being put into the hands of people who have lost touch with the spiritual. Western machine technology is the spirit of death made to look like life. It makes life seem easier, comfortable, cozy, but the price we pay includes the dehumanization of the self. To sleep in a cozy home, a good bed, and eat great, chemically produced food, you must rhyme your life with speed, rapid motion, and time. The clock tells you everything and keeps you busy enough to forget that there could be another way of living your life. It has made the natural way of living look primitive, full of famine, disease, ignorance, and poverty, so that we can appreciate our enslavement to the machine and further, make those who are not enslaved by it feel sorry for themselves. The machine has made itself look beautiful by making other ways of life that have existed for tens of thousands of years look silly, shameful, and uncivilized. But the truth is that the machine must eliminate every alternative to itself and focus every attention on itself, because it knows that its purpose is not to give life, but to suck the energy out of it. We have therefore come to the point where it is not possible to think of life outside of the context created by the machine from the traditional viewpoint. I must say that progress is the invention of someone who suffered immaturity and who craved to be initiated. This could be the reason that nothing is definite, final, and yet everything is fast-moving. I still remember the first time I took one of my elders into the city of Ouagadougou, and he beheld a multi-storied building. The poor man was so shocked that he was speechless for a while. When he finally spoke, he said, "Whoever did this has some serious problems." Obviously, the old man had never seen power displayed in public before. Wherever there is technology, there is a general degeneration of the spiritual. This is because the machine is the specter of the spirit, and in such a state, it does not serve because it can't serve. It needs servants. It is like having an elephant in your home as a pet. Would the energy spent to find 200 pounds of food every day compensate for what you get out of it? Anyone whose genius is wrapped up in this kind of effort must devote his life to it. Ritual, ceremony, and us. Grandfather, stop that. You're tickling me. What is that? I squealed. Grandfather wouldn't let me turn and see what he was up to. It was another one of his lessons. Brother Malidoma, be still. Tell me what is happening. Since I was very young at the time, I don't recall what led up to this exercise, but how I remember the shrill peeping of a little chick as grandfather rubbed its wet, downy body against mine. I squirmed at the tickling sensations, but grandfather held me tight to keep me from looking around. Grandfather, you are tickling me with a little chick. Why are you tickling me? I am not tickling you, he promised. Grandfather was trying to teach me something about ritual. I screamed with laughter once again, unable to contain myself. Was grandfather lying? Grandfather, why are you tickling me? I'm not tickling you. Yes, you are. But I am not, Brother Malidoma. How did this relate to ritual? Look, he explained, we are doing what we are doing so as to learn how to play with the spirits. They are at the heart of ritual. With his grip lessening, I turned to ask, why do people do rituals? I could see no baby chick. They kill chickens, goats, and all kinds of animals, and they eat some and throw others away. Why? Grandfather never looked at anybody while answering a question. He was working on a tobacco pouch while he spoke. Do you know why you go to the bathroom? Do you know why you urinate? Of course I know. I can't help it. Well then, you know why we do rituals. Village life rotates around subsistence activities, farming and hunting, and the practice of ritual. In a way, subsistence work links humans together, while ritual links humans to the gods or God. Living with my parents throughout my university years, it felt like the dead were not really dead. At least once a day, we had something to say to our ancestors. At least once a day, a word is addressed to the shrine of nature, be it at home before undertaking a journey to the farm, or to another village, be it in the farm before working at it. The presence of the other world is never trivial. The general impression is that ritual should precede human involvement with the world and with each other. Thus, planting begins with the offering of a sample of that which is going to be planted. In a way, the planting already happens at a divine level before happening actually. When one goes on a journey, be it into the city or be it to the nearby village, one must ritualize the travel at the ancestral shrine prior to undertaking the journey itself. It is assumed that, at the end of the ritual, in the course of which the traveler gives himself away to the gods, the journey itself has already happened in a metaphoric world. The rest is just translation of metaphor. When a person is suddenly sick, while he lies in pain, the head of the house first goes to a diviner and finds out what went wrong. There he finds out what ritual must be done. He comes back home, finds the elements that must enter into the ritual and performs it. Only after all this does it finally become necessary to do something directly with the sick person. By that time, the illness has been dealt with symbolically. What remains is the actualization of that which has already been performed. It follows then that primitive cultures normally deal with the physical world at the last stage. What goes wrong in the visible world is only the tip of the iceberg. So to correct a dysfunctional state of affairs effectively, one must first locate its hidden area, its symbolic dimension, work with it first, and then assist in the restoration of the physical visible extension of it. Visible wrongs have their roots in the world of the spirit. To deal only with their visibility is like trimming the leaves of a weed when you mean to uproot it. Ritual is the mechanism that uproots these dysfunctions. It offers a realm in which the unseen part of the dysfunction is worked on in ways that affect the seen. Consequently, each time we enter a ritual space, we do so because something in the physical world has warned us of possible deterioration at hand. This presupposes that one does not enter into a ritual without a purpose, a goal. As I said earlier, ritual is called for because our soul communicates things to us that the body translates as need, or want, or absence. So we enter into ritual in order to respond to the call of the soul. So illness, perhaps, is the sign language of the soul in need of attention. This means that our soul is the part of us that picks up on situations well ahead of our conscious awareness of them. Purpose is the driving force that contributes to the effectiveness of ritual. In the village, there are rituals that can backfire on the person performing them. These rituals do not have a purpose and thereby turn against the performer. This is tricky because one would assume that any ritual done to heal must be good. Elders say that ritual is like an arrow shot at something. When the intended target is not there, the arrow invents one. In such cases, the target may simply be a positive manifestation, but it could also be a negative manifestation. Take, for example, a case in which someone sacrifices a chicken prior to a journey instead of pouring a libation. The chicken sacrifice has the ability of righting a wrongdoing. In this case of the journey, no wrongdoing existed. Because of that, the person would meet trouble along the way because that person had set himself or herself up for it. It is like taking pills for a headache when you are fine and ending up with a stomachache because of it. So in such a case, the ritual is just misdirected. I still remember to this day a ritual involving the sacrifice of a chicken that died belly down instead of belly up. It was in the course of one of my returns home. The diviner I saw the day after my homecoming said that the spirit of my grandfather was angry at me because I had been using his name abroad without any concrete initiative, showing that I really did care for him. I was told that I should atone for the anger with the sacrifice of 3 chickens. I was uneasy about the whole situation because I had never thought that the spirit of my grandfather could be mad at me for any reason. Nonetheless, I felt that I should do what I was told since it would be a long time before I returned to the village again. In the village, sacrifices are very common. They fix things already gone wrong. And since there is always a plethora of things going wrong on a daily basis, chickens, goats, sheep, and even cows were instrumental in taking care of ritual requirements. The chicken died belly down. My father and I took the bloody knife used to cut its throat to the nearby diviner. The divination now revealed that the spirit of my grandfather had not wanted atonement, but solidification of our friendship and kinship. This is not something that requires blood at all. Spirits, like animals, do not take more than they need. My grandfather did not need any chicken, so he would not accept it. Instead, he wanted a little bit of ash and water to ensure the continuity of both his protection and his love. It was that simple, but a chicken had been wasted already, so we went back home, did what we were told by killing another chicken to repair the damage done by killing the previous one for the wrong reason. Of course, it meant an interesting occasion for a barbecue. There are cases when the sacrificed animal cannot be eaten. One of them involves the prevention of death. The animal in this case is either buried or abandoned in the wild. Ritual is also imposed on us by our souls, even though we can still prevail upon our souls for rituals. In other words, ritual can happen without someone feeling pain. In this case, it is either a preventive ritual or a celebration ritual. Among the Dagara, a good harvest must be celebrated with the gods. The whole village chooses one day in the course of which samples of harvest are brought to the gods along with sacrifices of chickens and goats. This ritual offering is followed by a feast that translates the human expression of oneness with the divine. Consequently, the purpose of this ritual is to avoid having to face a later ritual oriented around pain. This means that when one cruises with the world of the spirits, rituals are less and less a matter of stopping commotions than they are a matter of maintaining a healthy state of balance. Yet to arrive at that level of harmony, one must stay in the correct practice of ritual for a lengthy period of time. As alluded to earlier, the success of a ritual depends on the purpose of the individuals involved with it. Any ritual designed to satisfy an ego is a ritual for show, and therefore is a spiritual farce. But any ritual in which the persons involved invite the spirits to come and help in something that humans are not capable of handling by themselves, or in which humans honor gift giving from the divine, there is a likelihood of the ritual working. Some years ago, I was involved in a burial rite in the capital city of Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso, in Western Africa. An old woman was dead, and there was no way to take the body back to the village for her funeral. There were 3 or 4 of us who had been asked to dig the grave. It was late in the evening when we went to the municipal cemetery and began digging, while people gathered silently at the house of the deceased. Toward midnight, the grave was almost finished, and I was very exhausted. The dew had fallen on the grass, and its coolness numbed the nerves and increased my desire to rest. So while my co-workers were finishing the job, I moved a few yards away to take a cat nap in the tall grass. When I awoke, I found the cemetery all lit up. It was like daytime, and there were people everywhere. I figured it was the burial entourage that had accompanied the body while I had slept. It didn't take too long for me to notice that there was something odd about them. They were all dressed up with long ceremonial robes. All of them wore hats, and each sat on a grave, which I found intriguing. Fear crept into my very bones. I began to feel cold and numb. I thought about screaming, for I knew what was going on. My mind worked fast as I decided to get the hell out of there. But as I stood to leave, each of the grave sitters also stood one after the other. Thoughts raced through my mind anew. What if I made some noise? I dismissed that, thinking no one would hear me, and even if they did, no one in their right mind would come near this place. I was a lone living flesh among a graveyard of ghosts. The attention of each ghostly figure was undivided toward me. I looked at the perimeter of the cemetery, where I could see the sourceless light ending into the dark of night. It wasn't far away, I thought, and began to walk toward the darkness. They all began to follow me. I knew that I was not supposed to look back. The intensity of their presence behind me was such that every step took an eternity. I could not run. Each leg weighed a ton. What made the walk possible, I will never know. I felt half paralyzed. The challenge to lift each leg and place it in front of the other was overwhelming. My back felt like a burning platform fueled by a voracious, consuming energy that seemed to be eating away at me. This slowed me even more. On top of that, I didn't know if I was frightened, in pain, or just indifferent. All I knew was that I was witnessing something unearthly. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I had no idea what was going to happen next. As I approached the edge of night, the pull from behind increased. It was awful to sense from behind me a huge uproar coming from hundreds of throats, distant yet very close. It seemed like I was the only one intended to hear it. Never was darkness more appealing to me as at that moment when I was about to enter it. The closer I got, the lighter my body seemed to become, and the faster I was able to pursue it. I literally jumped that last few feet into the city night air. It felt as if I had been released from a powerful magnetic force as I ran toward the street light. Behind me, I could still sense a force field following. Either I was dragging it, or I was simply being pushed by it as if it were giving me wings. When I arrived home at my apartment, it was a little after 4 and my body was on fire. I was sweating and shivering all over from the combination of fever and exhaustion. Until daylight finally arrived, I felt suspended between life and death, with reality filtering through imprecisely. For a while, it seemed as though I were back at the cemetery. It was impossible to sleep, for every time I closed my eyes, I would see the graveyard all lit up again by the sourceless light, crowded with people mesmerized by my presence, wanting to come closer to me. At noon, one of the friends who had helped dig the grave with me came to visit. He was stunned to see how ill I was. I told him the whole story. He was in tears as he told me that I slept in the cemetery for nearly 5 hours. The old lady had been buried around midnight, and everyone had left quickly. The tall grass had hidden me from people, so no one saw me, and they, thinking that I had woken up when the burial began, did not even check to see if I was in the crowd. My friend suggested that I go home to my village. Phenomena like this cannot be endured without first checking them out with ancestral understanding. I, too, knew I needed to get back to my village home. Feeling weaker and weaker and fighting against a constant drift into hallucination, I knew I was a mess. My friend decided to go out and look for transportation that would get me back to my village. In the middle of the afternoon, he finally returned, having found nothing. He offered to take me to the central station and put me on any truck going the general direction of my village. I accepted. When I reached home, it was almost dawn. From afar, I saw someone sitting on the tip of the roof looking in my direction. As I came closer, I noticed it was my father. I knew he knew it was I, but he asked anyway, "Is that you, Malidoma?" "Yes, father, it is," I gasped. "Praise be to the ancestors," he volunteered as he came down from the compound roof. We didn't even shake hands. I felt like I was beyond recognition. I woke up my uncle and cousin. An hour later, I was in the ancestral room facing the shrine of the dead in the total darkness. The ancestral room is usually a healing and ritual shrine installed in a hidden windowless room inside the compound. My uncle prayed to the shrine, then asked my stepbrother to bring in the black sheep. He poured water on the animal while speaking about death and life. Then my father, who held a chicken in his hand, spoke. He thanked the spirits of the family for saving my life by directing me to come home. Then he plunged the screaming chicken into the water and ran it up and down my body clockwise. Each time the chicken came into contact with me, its feathers produced a strange sensation. I held my breath, closed my eyes, and focused on the image of the cemetery under daylight in the middle of the night. The image faded each time the chicken came into contact with my body. Suddenly, I noticed that the chicken was struggling for life. My father threw it away. It yelled, darted upward, and crashed to the floor of the medicine room dead. I was then asked to sit on the back of the sheep while it was decapitated. By the time all of this was completed, it was almost daylight. I went into the compound and, for the first time since the nap in the cemetery, slept. When I woke up that afternoon, my father was sitting next to me. In fact, it was his presence that woke me. He told me that several people had seen me entering and leaving the homes of relatives. They knew something had happened to me and that my soul was out of my body. The worst of it was that if I did not come home physically within 2 days, I would be dead. There was apparently no way to alert me to the fact that I should rush home for the very ritual that had just been performed. The village is so isolated from the outside world that it is utterly impossible to rush anything back and forth. So my father made a pledge to the ancestors. He promised them a cow if they could figure out a way to get me home within the next 24 hours so that I could be reunited with my spirit. I told my father what had happened in the cemetery. For him, it was all too clear. The sight of the spirits of the dead ripped my spirit away from me. No one survives the glance of a dead person. Because I was, in a sense, already dead, Only the death of something else would save me from actual death. This is what happened with the chicken and the sheep. It still took me a week to regain my strength. Although this was not the last time something like this happened, I never forgot it. It took the death ritual to save me from death. The blood of an animal prevented another human from having to be put into the ground. Our role in ritual. The episode in the graveyard is an extreme example that illustrates what actually happens when one is urgently in need of ritual. How many souls wander aimlessly out of their bodies, unconnected? How many people are gripped by the hand of death when it is still possible to loosen its grasp? To be in a machine-like culture is to have one's soul constantly at risk of being sucked out, when sacrifice is the only way to save a person from death. Or as I have come to notice in this culture, from fatal psychic or physical disruption, auto accidents, psychological illness, stress or depression, how does one find ritual space or sacred space when everywhere around no one seems to be aware that some kind of sacrificial ritual is needed? There are many cases in which people lives separated from their souls in this culture. There are many cases of people actually ending their lives because there was no home to go to, nor any kind of ritual to receive, such as the one from which I was fortunate enough to benefit. A Dagara elder would include such situations as accidents, heart attacks, or any sudden death within the category of separated souls. So the question as to whether an accident could have been avoided has its answer linked to whether it is possible for society to see the soul of the dying before its actual death. So ritual draws from this area of human existence where the spirit plays a life-giving role. We do not make miracles. We speak the kind of language that is interpreted by the supernatural world as a call to intervene in a stabilizing way in a particular life. Consequently, our role in ritual is to be human. We take the initiative to spark a process, knowing that its success is not in our hands, but in the hands of the kind of forces we invoke into our lives. So the force field we create within a ritual is something coming from the spirit, not something coming from us. We are only instruments in this kind of interaction between dimensions, between realms. There is ritual each time a spirit is called to intervene in human affairs. The structure of the ritual is what I would like to call ceremony because it can vary from time to time and from place to place. So a ceremony, perhaps, is the anatomy of a ritual. It shows what actually is taking place in the visible world on the surface and can therefore be seen, observed, corrected. The invisible part of the ritual, that which actually happens as a result of the ceremony, is what carries the ritual quality within itself. In my case, the killing of the chicken and the sheep along with being brought into sacred or ritual space, the ancestral shrine, are ceremonial. Becoming well after that is the effect of the ritual embedded in the ceremony. In the ritual, one has to have participants who are invisible and can actually produce a result that is unexpected. And because we take the risk or the initiative of putting a request to the spirits to intervene in our affairs, their coming turns our activity ceremony into a ritual. It still means that we as individuals play a central role in making a ritual happen. The gods themselves will not enact the ritual without us. What actually makes ritual a requirement is far beyond what the world, as it is, can handle. In the surface world, our ability to make things happen is very limited. This limitation is a reflection of the incompleteness of a world without the spirit realm. So spirit is our channel through which every gap in life can be filled. But the spirit realm will not take care of these gaps without our conscious participation. Thus, our collaboration makes us central to the actual happening of a ritual. Thank you for listening. Peace, blessings, and much love to you all. On Earth, there was once a people who held the knowledge of the universe across space and time. They were the Israelites. Over time, their wisdom was scattered among all nations, with each taking a piece. In the end, this left them destitute. Now, listen to this profound wisdom passed down through great works, presented in your voice, from your own perspective, from the perspective of the Israelites themselves. For early access to chapters and full audiobooks, consider becoming a member. For just $10 per month, you can unlock exclusive access to this priceless wisdom, once stolen from our ancestors. Hear their voices through your own as you join us on this journey of discovery and reclamation.